Welcome back. Now that I've introduced you to some of the major themes and backstory of the Odyssey, let's go ahead and talk about what happens in Book 1. In Book 1, we have a meeting of the gods. Here, Odysseus' main protector, Athena, intervenes on Odysseus' behalf. And it's important that she does this while Poseidon is away. You see, Poseidon has been causing Odysseus a lot of trouble in his journey. It's in this part of the story that we learn a lot about the return home of some of the other heroes who were at Troy. We find out that the Nostos of Agamemnon, the return home of Agamemnon, was horrible, and that Agamemnon was actually murdered by his wife and her lover in his own palace the second he returned home. And we also learned that his son, Orestes, avenged his death by killing both his mother and her lover. So right away we have this story of an unfaithful wife and a dutiful son who avenges his father. I think Homer inserts this into the story because he wants us to think of these things as we think of the wife and son themes in the Odyssey. What did the gods agree to do? They agree that Athena will go down to Earth disguised as Mentes, an old friend of Odysseus's, and visit Telemachus, and advise him to go on a journey to go look for his father. It's also in Book 1 that we get our first appearance of Penelope, at home. Well, I warned you that we will be talking about the theme of the oikos, or home, quite a bit in the Odyssey, and that's never more true than right here in Book 1. What happens during Athena's visit in Book 1? At the house of Odysseus, Telemachus offers Athena food before asking her why she's even there. This is a show of xenia, or guest friendship. And it's only after the meal that Telemachus asks Mentes/Athena about his or her name, home, ancestryship, and relationship with Odysseus. This is real hospitality, folks. Also, when Telemachus scolds his mother for telling people what to do, he tells her that spinning and weaving are her work, that is, work for women, while speaking out in public are his. So we can see that, at least in Telemachus' mind, what's supposed to be happening at home is that women are supposed to be spinning and weaving. We'll get more on this later. Also, there's ample food and drink. The household of Odysseus, the oikos of Odysseus, is never lacking in these things. This initial episode with Telemachus gets us into a part of the book that many scholars refer to as the Telemachia, or Telemachy. Books 1 through 4 are often called the Telemachy because Telemachus has his own miniature epic in which he has to assert his manhood by bossing his mother around apparently, telling the suitors off, and making a speech in public. This happens in Books 1 and 2. And then he goes on a journey to find out where his father is. So if this is mainly a book about Odysseus and his trip home, Telemachus also has a role in this. And Books 1 through 4 seem to parallel Odysseus' own wanderings in that Telemachus has to travel quite far to find out the whereabouts of his father. Now, let's talk about Penelope for a minute, because she's an interesting character in all of this. She doesn't wish to marry any of the suitors, so she tells them that she'll marry them just as soon as she's done weaving a funeral shroud for Odysseus' father, Laertes. So she weaves this thing by day, it's very ornate, but by night she and her slave girls sneak into the room where the loom is and undo it a little bit. Sort of this 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing. And eventually she'll get caught. One of the slave girls, Melantho, betrays her and lets the suitors know what's going on. At this point, the suitors insist that she marry one of them and make up her mind. This is what will really cause a lot of the tension of the story to pick up, as she's forced to make a choice. What kind of woman is Penelope? Penelope is a woman who is clever and shrewd and wants to protect what is hers. She also seems to want to protect Odysseus even in his absence, and the household that she lives in with him. Now let's turn to Telemachus' journey to go find his father. In Book 4, Telemachus visits the home of Menelaus and Helen in Sparta. Those of you familiar with the movie Troy might be a little surprised in Book 4 because you thought Menelaus was dead. No, he's not. He actually returns home from the war safe and sound. When Telemachus visits them, everyone weeps for Odysseus as they quickly realize that Telemachus is in fact Odysseus' son. Menelaus will tell us the story of his return home, and he'll tell us about what happened to his brother Agamemnon. Remember, Agamemnon was murdered in his home by his wife and her lover. What's happening in the oikos of Menelaus during Telemachus' visit? Some common themes are already starting to show up. Helen is spinning wool into thread when Telemachus arrives. Menelaus lets Telemachus sleep at his house before even asking him why he's there. This is a show of Xenia. Also, there's ample food and drink. We'll get some twists to this in a minute. It's also in Book 4 that we learn a little bit more about the character of Helen. While they're all feasting in the house of Menelaus, Helen slips a drug called nepenthe into all of their wine, and this causes them to forget their troubles. And we learn from Helen about how Odysseus came to visit her during the Trojan War. This is her recollection of Odysseus. He disguises himself by covering himself with dirt and dressing up in rags. He visits her inside the walls of Troy, inside the palace at Troy, and she bathes him. And while he's there, she not only gives him a bath, but tells him the way out. And on his way, he murders many Trojans. So Helen seems to be solidly pro-Greek, as she's letting Odysseus murder Trojans. But then we learn from Menelaus in another story that Helen tried to trick the Greeks, hiding inside the Trojan horse to come out by pretending to be their wives. She walked around the Trojan horse, calling out to each of them in the voice of their wives. And it was only with great effort that Menelaus was able to restrain his men and keep them from crying out to her. So, whose side is Helen on? She lets Odysseus kill Trojans, she drugs people who were at a banquet with her, and she tries to get the Greeks in trouble who were hiding in the horse. It looks like Helen is actually on Helen's side. Book 5 is going to be the part of the story where we finally meet Odysseus. This is the part of the story that sets Odysseus' adventures in motion, at least from our perspective. It's only when Hermes is sent by Zeus to free him in Book 5 that we actually meet the central figure of our story. So this is, again, very different from the Iliad. What's happening in the oikos, or cave of Calypso, when Hermes comes to visit her on Ogygia? Calypso is weaving. Sound familiar? Calypso does ask Hermes' business, but shows him Xenia by setting out ambrosia and nectar. I should talk about this for a minute. The gods are immortal in part because they don't eat bread and they don't drink wine. They eat ambrosia, which is their food, and nectar, which is their drink. So she does the god version of what the humans do by laying out food and drink. And it's only after dinner that they actually discuss business. So even the gods have to observe Xenia. What happens to Odysseus after this? He goes on a wild ride. Calypso is mad at first at the gods, but relents and agrees to set him free. But not before she tests him a little bit. Calypso asks Odysseus if he doesn't want to be immortal and spend the rest of his life with her. Odysseus freely admits that his wife, Penelope, back on Ithaca, does not in any way compare to Calypso. Still, he misses her, and he misses Ithaca and his friends and family there. That's where he wants to be. So we see that Odysseus has heart, and he has a reason to be home, even if he's been sleeping with this other woman for 7 years. Well, it's not as easy as her snapping her fingers and sending him home. Calypso doesn't do that at all, as a matter of fact. Calypso hands him an axe and sends him out to the woods to cut down trees so he can build himself a raft. Odysseus does this. She provisions the raft and lets him set sail. And he sails for many days. And finally, Poseidon, flying over, sees Odysseus and sees that he's sailing on a boat and gets angry at him. Why is Poseidon angry at Odysseus? Because Odysseus has blinded his son. But we'll get to that story in Book 9. Poseidon zaps Odysseus' ship with a storm. Odysseus is forced to swim for days before he comes aground on the island of Scheria. Book 6 is concerned with Phaeacia, which is on the island of Scheria. Who lives there? The Phaeacians, a race of people who live apart from other men and have special ships that don't require rudders because the gods steer them where they want them to go. And this is where we get Odysseus' rehabilitation into human civilization. The journey to Phaeacia is really Odysseus' rehabilitation into human civilization. The Phaeacians had immigrated from the land of Hyperia because it was too close to where the Cyclopes were living. The Cyclopes had been trashing their villages, so they made a fresh start. And Odysseus will make a fresh start here himself. He washes ashore and hides under two intertwined olive trees. And the symbolism here is that the olive tree is one of the attributes of Athena. So even in sleep, she's protecting him. Speaking of sleep, Athena needs to get Nausicaa, the daughter of the king, motivated to help Odysseus out. She needs to be in the right place at the right time. So she comes down to Nausicaa in the form of a dream, and sitting over her head in her sleep, she says to Nausicaa that she needs to wash the clothes of the house, otherwise she won't look nice. And why would she be worried about looking nice? Because she needs to attract a man to marry her. So she shames her into going down to the river and washing her clothes, but also mixes in talk of marriage, the kind of thing that Nausicaa will be very interested in. What's going on at the oikos of Alcinous during Odysseus' visit? Nausicaa informs Odysseus that he can find her mother by sitting by the hearth spinning yarn. Sound familiar? Odysseus must first go to Nausicaa's mother, Arete, in order to get Xenia. Now, this is a little bit of a twist, because normally you go to the man of the household to ask for hospitality. Also, there's ample food and drink. These are the things you expect to see in the oikos of civilized human beings in the Odyssey. Here we see Nausicaa driving her mule cart. We'll learn more about Odysseus' adventures in my next lecture on Book 9.